Before we get on to that interview and coronavirus more generally, I just want to get your reaction to the stabbings that we've seen in Reading, where 3 people have sadly lost their lives.
Well, it was terrible scenes that we saw in Reading last night, and my thoughts and prayers are with the families and the friends of those affected. But we don't yet know the motives behind the stabbings. I trust the police to establish the facts and bring the perpetrator to justice. But it's terrible scenes that we witnessed.
OK. Now, as you say, a fast unfolding story, and we're going to be hearing a lot more about it on Sky News later today. We just heard from the House Secretary, Matt Hancock, who was talking about, I guess, the need for people to go out, to shop, to start reopening the economy, because he believes that the government is managing to now suppress the virus. Do you think it's safe to go shopping?
Well, I went to shop yesterday to buy Father's Day presents for my husband on behalf of my children. So I did that. I wore a face mask. I tried to, as best as I could, to be socially distanced from other people in the shop. We all want the economy to get back up and running. And actually, perhaps at a more basic level, we all want to be able to spend more time with friends and families and loved ones in a way that we haven't been able to do for the last almost 3 months now. So we all want to get back to some degree of normality, but we need to do that in a safe way. And we'll wait to see what the scientists say this coming week about relaxing the restrictions from 2 meters to 1 meter. We all want to get there as soon as possible, but it is incredibly important that we follow the science and do this in a safe way.
I want to talk to you about schools. Is it safe for parents to send their children back to school?
Well, schools have stayed open safely throughout this pandemic and throughout the lockdown. More children started going back to school in June, and that was done safely. I would like to see more children return to school safely. But the truth is, the government have failed in the commitments that they made to parents and to the country, which was to return all primary school children to school safely before the summer holidays. And frankly, I don't know what the Education Secretary, Gavin Williamson, has been doing for the last 3 months, because he should have been using this period of lockdown to prepare schools to ensure that the space is available, because many schools are cramped, particularly in inner city areas. We're going to struggle with the smaller bubbles in which children need to be taught in. And so the government should have been working with libraries, with community centres, with leisure centres to open them potentially as school settings, or putting temporary buildings in. The government didn't do that. They were asleep at the wheel. Gavin Williamson was set a test. He has failed it miserably. And now the government are trying to blame other people for their failure to get schools open. I think that schools could have opened safely for all children before the summer holidays if the government had thrown everything into it.
So you're saying there about how you would like to see more children go back to school safely, but I can't help but think, what does safely actually mean? It's a political decision, isn't it? It's not always a scientific decision. The scientists are never going to say green light, red light, things are safe or not safe. It's a balance of risk, isn't it? We criticise the government for hiding behind the science, but sometimes I wonder if Labour hides behind the science a bit too. Is it safe for more children to go back to school now?
Well, more children are going back to school. Every week, more children are returning to school safely because schools are putting in place the measures to make it safe. But the government could have done much more to get more children to school safely. And Labour have put forward constructive proposals like using libraries and leisure centres. It was possible to do this if government had thrown more into it. It's not possible in all school settings at the moment to bring all children back because there aren't enough classrooms to teach those smaller groups of people. And that's why the government should have been using this period of lockdown to enable more children to return to school safely. The government now say that all children...
Should they cut the social distancing regulations from 2 metres to 1 metre then?
Well, if the scientists advise that this week, then of course that would make a difference. But I believe even with the social distancing measures that we've got in place now at 2 metres, more children could have been brought back into a school setting if the government had have made the effort to use other buildings, to bring in temporary staff, to put up temporary buildings. Those are the sorts of measures that should have been taken over the last few months, because, by September, children would have missed out on 6 months of education. The schools have done their best to ensure homeschooling, but we know that many children haven't accessed that. It is imperative that the government put the needs of children and the education of children 1st. They're now being complacent about getting all children back by September. But again, I would urge the government to do the work now to make that possible, and also to ensure that those children who have fallen behind are given more support to be able to catch up, so that we don't have a generation who are left behind and locked out of future opportunities because of mistakes made during this pandemic.
Now, you have a very economic background, so I'm interested to know about your thoughts on the current economic picture in the United Kingdom, with figures out this week showing that UK debt is greater than GDP, greater than the entire economy. As we try and work out how to ease our way out of lockdown, how worried should we be by the economic picture?
Well, the economic picture is incredibly worrying, and you put the point, Sophie, to Matthew Hancock, that we both have the highest number of deaths in Europe, and at the same time, we're now forecast by the Organisation of Economic Cooperation and Development, the international economic think tank, that we're going to have the deepest recession of any country in the developed world. And that is incredibly worrying. And the two are related, because we came too late, we were too slow on lockdown, we were too slow to get personal protective equipment and clothing to those on the front line, too slow to put a protective ring around our care homes. And as a result, the virus was left unchecked in many cases to go through our communities. And as a result, it is harder here to ease the lockdown, and also because, again, as you put Matthew Hancock, we've failed to put in place the test, trace and isolate system that we need. And all of these are having their toll, not just on lives, but also on livelihoods. And the figures both on the debt and the deficit, but also the jobs figures and the fall in GDP in March should give us all huge cause for concern. And we do need from the Chancellor a budget for jobs, a back to work budget in July this year, to quickly get on top of this, to support people to go back to work, to protect jobs, and to support those sectors of the economy that are most impacted by this crisis. And there are practical measures that the government could put in place, for example, to support sectors like hospitality, to support coastal communities that are particularly affected by the lack of tourism that we've seen in the last few weeks and months.
And we'll be talking a bit more about the hospitality industry with the chef Ottolenghi a little bit later on. I'm keen just to talk to you a little bit about Labour and the Labour Party, because there was a review out this week into why Labour lost the election, and it concluded that it was the combination of having an unpopular leader, a manifesto that many people regarded as a fantasy, and a confused message on Brexit. So if that's the case, why did you elect a man to lead the Labour Party who was responsible for Labour's position on Brexit at the last election as Shadow Brexit Secretary?
Well, I've been a member of the Labour Party now for nearly 25 years, and I've campaigned in every election locally and nationally since I joined the party. No one underestimates the scale of the challenge. Anybody who knocked on doors, both in the election in December last year, but also at the last few general elections, knows what a mountain Labour has to climb. But I think also everybody can see that in the last 2 and a bit months that Keir Starmer has been leader of the Labour Party, that we've begun to climb that mountain. People can see in Keir Starmer a different sort of opposition, a constructive opposition, holding the government to account, but also they see in Keir Starmer somebody who could be Prime Minister.
I just want to go back to the specific question I asked, which was on Brexit, because in a poll of Labour members carried out for this report, 57% named the Brexit policy of promising a second referendum on any departure deal as the single most unpopular and challenging idea to sell to voters, saying views were that it was dithering, dire and reflecting division. Now, you've decided that the man responsible for that policy should lead the party. Are you really learning the right lessons from the election?
Well, all of the party, the previous leadership of the party, were responsible for those decisions. I don't think that is the only reason, or even the biggest reason, for our defeat in the election in December. But let's look at where we are now. In the 2 months that Keir Starmer has been leader of the Labour Party, the poll ratings have gone up. More people expressed confidence that Keir Starmer could be Prime Minister and lead our country. Nobody, least of all Keir Starmer, underestimates the scale of the challenge ahead of us. But I think in the last 2 months, we've shown that it is a mountain that Labour can climb under Keir Starmer's leadership. And I'm proud to serve in the shadow cabinet under Keir.